Hello friends, welcome to SQL Explained again. In this video we're going to be doing a couple more things in a bid to complete our solution for disaster recovery and high availability solution. So I'm going to bring up my run book, and I have made some changes here and there. You can see it's quite different from the last video. And what we'll be doing is, you see these three servers, the primary, the secondary, and the file share server. We're going to be joining them to the domain controller, this one, so that we can do a lot of things with that. One of which is the user that we created on the domain controller, which is the SQL primary and SQL secondary user account. We can use them to log on to any of these computers, provided that we've given them the permission to do so. But in our case, we've actually disabled firewall, so they'll be able to log onto any of these computers. So that's what we'll be doing today. So we'll join these computers to the domain controller, and that's it. So let's get to work. All right, so I'm going to bring up my virtual machine, and before we proceed, there's something I quickly want to show you. Look at the RAM. So for domain controller we have 2 GB, for file share we have 1.3, for primary 1.5. I'm just moving them around because we're getting to a point where I'll have to bring up all the servers at once, and depending on the memory your host computer have, you have to be able to do some memory management here. So I don't want to put too much pressure on my host computer, and that's why I'm beginning to reduce the memory size of each of these computers. So I just wanted to show you how to do that. So make sure you do it while the virtual machine is turned off. So you click on settings and you get to this page. So what you'll see is this slider here. So if I want to go up to 32 gig, I could do that. If I want to go to 64 gig, I could do that. But I'm actually going to come down. Right, so I just want to give it 1 gig, so I just make it 1000 megabyte, and that's for the domain controller. It's not really going to be doing much. It's just going to sit down there. We're not installing SQL or anything on it, so we should be fine with that. Actually, I don't like the view of 1000 MB. Let's make it 1048, and let's see what that gives. Good. So just wanted to see one gig, and that's cool. Then what do we have for secondary? Let me bring this down a little bit. Yes, to some 1.5. all right, so we want to join 1, 2, 3 to the domain controller. I'm going to be starting from the primary. Let's power on. Remember the network configuration we did for our domain controller before we actually install the Active Directory? That's exactly what we'll be doing to each of the computers. And don't forget, looking at the IP addresses for the domain controller, remember we use our router IP address as the default gateway, and we have this one here, 192.168.1.110, and we wanted to make sure that it's on the same subnet with the default gateway. And default gateway, you might be wondering, what do we mean by that? I mean, I'm not a network administrator, but I could still tell you a couple of things about that. So basically, if you are now, the host computer is the one who is like the overall head of this whole networking house. Okay, so putting this IP addresses in the same network with a router makes it possible for this network communication to happen between them, and that's one. And again, if when it comes to some DNS resolution, you know, it's going to rely on the host IP address to do all that fancy stuff. But I mean, that's as far as I can tell you at this point. But you can Google, do some more reading on that. It'll be interesting. But just bear in mind that you need your router address to be the default gateway. I mean, from the sound of it, default gateway, it's like you're getting into a place. What's the default? What's the first one? The first point of entry, you know, kind of thing. And that's your host computer, obviously, before you're actually going to be able to go into other of the virtual machines. So as you can see, for the DC, we have 110, the same subnet, and for primary we have 111. Just increasing the number by one, really. It could be anything, as long as they're all on the same subnet. You can put this figure anything, as long as it's not been taken within the network. Okay, so if, for example, if 112 was being used already, you can't give another computer 112 basically, so it has to be unique within the network. Okay, so let's go. So you remember this: Control Alt Insert, and it looks like some work has not actually been completed on this server. That's why we still have this. I'm not sure if we have we haven't installed tools on this one. So I'm just gonna click on install tool, and I would have to also install the tool. So I'll pause the video, and once it's done, I'll get back. You already know how to do this. It's in the previous video. So once the tools are completely installed, I'll just click on this and then run the installer. All right, so that's been taken care of. Now we're back. So what we want to do now is, first of all, check what our server name is. Just type in host name. This is our primary. I know some of you might be wondering, why would you name the server primary? By the time we fully configure our always on solution, our clustering, by the time we start failing over and primary becomes secondary, then the name of the server doesn't really make sense anymore. But hey, this is just for demo purposes, okay? So obviously it's not the best name I could give this to this server, but it would just do for the sake of understanding the concept of building the environment. You can name your server anything, okay? All right, so now we have our primary server. So what we just want to do is configure our networking. Okay, so I like to bring them side by side, and you see this icon right here, internet access. Just right click on it and hit the open network and security. Let's wait for that to come up. All right, so what you want to click on now is the change adapter settings, and you can see the network adapter here. Right click and hit properties, then find your way down to Internet Protocol version 4, TCP IPv4. Hit on it and then click on properties. This box will come up. Click on use the following IP addresses. So you want to manually put in the IP address that you want. So I'll drag this to the side. So for our primary server, what we want to use is 192.168.1.111, and the subnet mask will just come up automatically. And our preferred DNS. And we're done. Close. It's trying to identify, and here we go. Cool. So now let's try to see if we can join this computer to the domain controller. So right click on this PC. Oh, sorry, I didn't show you how I actually got here. So click on the File Explorer, come to this PC, right click on it, go to Properties. Let's maximize this. And the same way you change the name of the computer, come to change settings and hit change. This time around, we're not gonna use workgroup. We're gonna be using member of domain. And what's the name of our domain? I believe it's dc3xpoint.com. Alright, an active directory for the domain could not be contacted. Okay, let's try something else. Right, I know what it will be. The domain controller is actually turned off. So we need to turn that on. Let's bring that up. That was why it couldn't be contacted, because it was turned off. So let's power this on. And we'll wait for it to. Okay, so it's back on. Let's put the password. Let me quickly bring up Active Directory so I can remember what the username was. Oops. Okay. Alright, so it's SQL Pry. Actually, we need to create one more because that's the one we're going to use to connect. So let me just make that the cluster admin. Clue admin. Okay. Finish. So we have clue admin account. Yeah, that's it. Clue admin. All right. So let's go to the primary and let's try to connect again. Whoops, still some problem. We'll see what the problem is now. Okay, so let's try it again. Let me see. Let's look at the error and see where our problem is. Okay, so it looks like we have some DNS problem somewhere. So we need to think about our configuration again. First of all, let's go into the domain controller and have a look at what we have going on there. Let's check the health of the DNS server. So if we come here, this is our DNS, and actually this is gonna make us to do some discussion around DNS. Let me first of all explain to you. I know I mentioned earlier on that what DNS does is it maps the IP address to the name. For example, we have our domain controller. What's it called? Let's accept that. Yeah. So where is it? Actually, let's just go into our DNS. So go into tools, and then I'll bring up our DNS console here. Now forget about everything, all these things that you're looking at. Just focus on this one, and this is where we're going to. I just want to have a look at the DC that we created. Well, we have our status here. It says it's running. If I right click, or if I double click on it, we come into here, and then we look at this last one here, which is meant to be our DC. It's pointing to this 192.168.1.110, and if I double click on it, we can see that the fully qualified name for this computer is this. So let's actually go back into this computer. Let's bring up our command prompt and try to ping DC. All right. The reason we're getting this back, you can see pinging DC 192.168.1.110 is because that's what's registered in the DNS. Okay, so what DNS typically does is it just maps this name to this. So the problem we're having now is DNS is finding it hard to resolve our dc.3explained.com. That's the problem. And from experience, I can tell that something is wrong with our IP network configuration. It all comes down to networking. So what I'll do is I'll bring back our runbook again and have a look at this. Let me bring this down so we have everything in one place. Okay, so let's have a look. So we have our DC, we have this. Aha, okay, this is the DNS server, and that's the DNS server for the DC where it connects to. But for this primary server, yeah, I got it. Yeah, I can see that's where the problem is. So we can't use the same DNS server for them. Every other server that will be joining to the domain controller should have a DNS name or a DNS IP that is bound to this. So what we need to do is do this. So all the DNS servers for the computers that will be joined to this domain controller must have their DNS name, DNS IP linked to the IP address of the domain controller. So that way, what we're saying in essence is the DNS server for this computer, this primary server, is this. It's going to be using the DNS server here. So whenever it needs to resolve anything, it will be talking to this IP address where we have our DNS configured. And how did this DNS get there? It got there as a result of, remember when we promoted the domain controller to become we promoted the Active Directory to become a domain controller. Remember that? Yeah. So that's when it installs and configure all this DNS and DHCP and all those other stuff. All right, so let's try this out. Let's try this out and see if it solves our problem. I'll just click out of all of this so we can go back to it again. All right, right click on the network adapter, go to IPv4 properties, and then let's remove all of this and point it to 192. Okay, and close. Right, let's try the ping. Aha, good. So here we are. We're good. So let's try to join the computer to the domain now. Now join to domain dc.3xpoint.com. Brilliant. That's what I expected to see. So now we need to put in the user account that we created on the domain controller. That's what we'll need to pass in here. So it's expecting some credentials that will connect to the domain controller, because don't forget what domain controller does is it manages the security, the logon, the permissions, policies, and all of this. So if you try to connect to primary server, for example, using a domain account, the domain controller will be in charge of validating that permission. So if you have some permission that are set already, it's like asking the domain controller, okay, what sort of permission does this person have, and what sort of resources does this person have access to, so that the domain controller will be in charge of managing all of those things. So now, what's our domain? It's dc.3xpoint.com. Yes, /clue admin. And let's see if this works. Cool. Welcome to the dc.3xpoint.com domain, and we're good. So these has now joined to that server, and we're going to do that for all the other servers. So we're going to have to restart this one. Close, restart now, and that's good. So let's minimize this and do the same for all the other servers. File share. Alright, so let's so the DNS is 192.168.1.110. Close and close. Right click this PC, maximize. Oops, we're having some memory pressure here. Okay, change settings, change, and domain dc.3xpoint.com. Boom. So it's dc.3xpoint.com /clue admin. So as you can see, that user account does not exist on this file share server, but it's been created on the domain controller. But now we can use it to log on to this computer, or even the primary or even the secondary computer, as long as they belong to the same domain controller. All right. So I wouldn't show you the third server, you know, so we can manage our time. And yeah, we'll end this for today, and then we'll see in the next movie. If you need any questions whatsoever, you can drop a message, drop a comment, send a message on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on wherever social media. Send any question whatsoever, and I'll be helpful. I'll be happy to help to the best of my capacity. Okay, it could be on DBA, database administration related, data analytics, big data, any of all those stuff, you know. Thank you very much. See you in the next video.